Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another planetarium live stream. My name is Jessica. I am the director of the planetarium, and with me tonight are two probably familiar faces if you've been here before, but I'll still let them introduce themselves. And we will start off with Lindsay here.
Hi, I'm Lindsay. I'm a physics graduate student here at UMD.
And I'm Eli. I'm a physics undergraduate student at UMD.
So, tonight we are going to be taking a look at the December sky and talking you through some of the stars and constellations that you can find. We've got some really great stories for these constellations and also give you tips and tricks on how to find them for yourself if you go out stargazing this month. So, let me get switched over. There we go. All right. So the program that we are using for our star show tonight is called Stellarium. It's a really cool program. If you've been to any of our virtual star shows before, you've know about this a little bit, but it's also free to download. So there is a link in the description, in the video description, if you would like to download it and play around with it yourself. It's really awesome. You can set it up for any date, time, and location, and it'll show you what the sky looks like. It's a great way to kind of learn the night sky and learn how to find things and navigate around. So before we get into some stars, let's go take a look over in the southwest. Just now starting to set are Jupiter and Saturn, and this is real time right now for us here in Duluth. And they're getting very close together. That's because we are coming up on the Great Conjunction on December 21st, when Jupiter and Saturn are going to be so close together that to your naked eye, it's going to look as just one bright object. So definitely try and get out right. I think we're saying like 5 to like 6:30 is going to be the best time to go take a look on December 21st, looking over in the southwest. We will also be doing a telescope stream that night to show you the view in case you can't get out. But we also have another planet out right now, high up in the south. That nice red bright light that you see is the planet Mars. All right. So let's head over to the north now, and we are going to take a look at a pretty familiar set of stars that's going to kind of start us off for the night. And so we're going to look for 7 bright stars that are in the shape of a dipper. And so we have the handle and the kind of cup of our dipper, and this is our Big Dipper sitting kind of low in the northern sky this time of year. Now, the Big Dipper is actually not a constellation. It's an asterism. It's a smaller grouping of stars that's more recognizable within a larger grouping, within a larger constellation. And so the Big Dipper is actually the 7 brightest stars in the constellation of Ursa Major, which is the Big Bear. And so to see our bear, we're going to add on some more stars, and our handle is actually going to become a tail. Here is the back, ear, nose, chest, front legs, belly, and back legs. And I'll do it one more time. Tail, back, ear, nose, chest, front legs, belly, and then back legs. And so that is our big bear there. And this time of year, she's kind of walking along the horizon. Now, our Big Bear and Big Dipper aren't the only ones that are up in the sky. We also have a Little Dipper, and the best way to find that is to actually use the Big Dipper to help you. So with our Big Dipper, we have these 2 front stars at the front of the cup. These are our pointer stars, because if we connect them in a line and follow that line, it's going to point us to this bright star, which is Polaris, the North Star. Now, a lot of people think that Polaris is famous because it's the brightest star in the sky, or at least that's what they think. And that is not true. The brightest star in the sky is the star Sirius, which we'll see in just a little bit. It is up during the winter. Polaris is a pretty bright star, but the reason it's so famous and especially important to early cultures and early navigators is it's the only star in the sky that doesn't move. So if we kind of speed time up just a little bit, we can see all of the other stars in the sky move around, but Polaris sits still. And it's always in the direction of north. So early navigators knew that if they could find that star, they'd know what direction north was. And once you know north, you know your other direction. So it was a very useful navigation star. All right, let me just reset back to right now. So again, we have our Big Dipper, our pointer stars, which have pointed us to Polaris, the North Star. Now, Polaris sits at the end of the handle of the Little Dipper. And so here is the handle and the cup of our Little Dipper. You'll notice that the stars in the Little Dipper are not nearly as bright as those in the Big Dipper. It has 3 pretty bright ones, but the other 4 are fairly dim. And that's why the Little Dipper can be hard to find unless you have super, super dark skies. So if you're having trouble, it's not just you. These stars are fairly dim and can be difficult to find. Now, our Little Dipper is also our little bear. And so to see our little bear, again, our handle is going to be a tail, nice long tail there. And then the cup of the dipper, Little Dipper, is our little bear body. So we have back leg, back, front legs, and the head would be here-ish. Definitely to me looks more like a squirrel and not so much a bear. Even our big bear here doesn't quite look like a bear because of that long tail. But the Greeks did have a reason for this. So these 2 constellations, Ursa Major and Ursa Minor, are Big Bear and Little Bear, are Greek constellations. And the story goes that these 2 bears started out as humans. We have a woman named Callisto and her son Arcas. Now, Callisto was friends with Zeus, who is the king of the Greek gods. And Zeus was spending a lot of time down on Earth hanging out with her. And his wife Hera got jealous and decided to kind of take her revenge by turning Callisto into a bear. So Callisto is now off living her bear life. Her son, Arcas, notices that his mom has gone missing and goes out searching for her. And while he's searching in the woods, comes across this big bear. That is his mother, but he doesn't realize that. And so he, being frightened by this big bear, gets ready to draw his bow to protect himself. Zeus, who had been watching everything unfold, realized what Arcas was about to do. And so to save Callisto, he decides to turn Arcas into a bear as well, because he can't turn Callisto back human. He can't undo Hera's curse. And so now we have Mama and son as these 2 bears, and Zeus decides to put them up in the sky so that they can live together forever as stars up in the sky. But to get them up there, he has to pick them up by their bear tails, swing them around, and fling them up into the sky. And that process of being spun and flung is what stretched out those bear tails, giving us our big mama bear Callisto with her stretched out tail, and our little baby bear Arcas with his stretched out tail. So that is the story of the bears. All right, well, I want to head over to the east, because in the east, we are starting to have some really great, bright constellations that we can see up in the wintertime. There are 6 of them, and so this is known as the winter hexagon. Now, one of those that's pretty familiar, you can see just coming up above the horizon, is Orion the Hunter. But there are a few others associated with the winter hexagon. So what I'm actually going to do is speed up time just a little bit so that all of our winter hexagon can be up and visible in the sky. And so this is going to take us to about 11. Oops, pause. Or no, we're at midnight. We're at midnight. A little bit later to get all of them up, but as we get deeper into winter, they'll be up earlier and earlier, and you'll be able to see all of them just after sunset. So, as I said, in the east, kind of southeast now, we have 6 really bright, prominent constellations that are known as the winter hexagon. And so we are going to start with the most famous of them, the one that's most easily recognizable, and that is Orion the Hunter. And so we have his kind of shoulders right here. Actually, these star names are a little bit too prominent right now. Let's just make those go away for the moment. All right, so we have his shoulders, the 3 stars that make his belt, his knees, and then we have either a shield and a club, or this is a bow and some arrows. Then we also have his sword hanging off of his belt. So Orion is a hunter, which is why he's got, either sword and shield or bow and arrows and a club and all of this fun stuff. But there's a lot of cool other things within Orion. So this bright red star here is the star Betelgeuse. Let me pick on it. There we go. Or Betelgeuse, Betelgeuse. I've heard a couple of different pronunciations. Now the star is actually red in color, and that's because this is a red supergiant. It's a star that's at the end of its life and is going to go supernova sometime soon. Now, soon in astronomy could be, 1,000 years from now. But when it does go supernova, it's going to be a brilliant sight. Now, I don't want to worry anyone because we are far enough away that it's not going to harm us. We're not going to be affected by this. But we are close enough that the supernova should be bright enough to be seen during the daytime. So it's going to be a brilliant event when it happens. And I know many of us are hoping that it happens actually soon, our definition of soon, so that we could see it. I would love to see this in my lifetime. But the other, excuse me, really cool thing in the constellation of Orion is one of my favorite objects to look at through a telescope, and it's in his sword. So you'll see the sword has these 3 kind of points of light that start off looking possibly like 3 stars. But if we zoom in, we see that sitting in the middle there is actually not a star, but a big gas cloud that we call a nebula. And so this is the Orion Nebula. This particular nebula is what we call a star-forming region because it is a giant stellar nursery. It is where stars are being born. And it is actually these really pretty colors just from the different gases and dust and the different stars warming up the gas and all of that. And it does look very much like this through a telescope. The colors aren't quite as vibrant to your eye, but it is still a beautiful sight and is one of my favorite things to look at. All right. Now, with the bears, I told a couple of Greek stories, but the Greeks weren't the only ones to see patterns in the stars and use them to make pictures and tell stories. So one of my favorite Orion, or this grouping of stars stories, actually comes from South America, and I'm forgetting where in South America, so I apologize. But in South America, because they're below the equator, Orion is actually upside down to them. So these would be his shoulders and these would be his knees. And so Betelgeuse here, this red star, sits at one of this man's knees. And so the story goes that this was an unfortunate husband who got into an argument with his wife while she was holding a meat cleaver. And she didn't like what he said, so she chopped off one of his legs. And what we're seeing here with this red star is the bloody stump of his leg. So yeah, don't. The moral of their story is do not anger your wives while she's holding a meat cleaver. So there you go. One of my favorite stories associated with this grouping of stars. All right, I think that's enough time on Orion. Let's take a look at some of our other constellations in our winter hexagon. So Orion, as a hunter, does have a couple of hunting dogs with him. To find them, we're going to use Orion's belt here and follow them in a line kind of down to the super bright star right here. This is the star Sirius. It is the brightest star in the sky and is in the constellation of Canis Major, or the big dog. And that's why Sirius is often known as the dog star. So to see the full dog, I kind of picture that Sirius is his eye. And so here's one of his ears. His mouth is open because he's kind of barking. And then we have body and then some legs back here. So there is our dog. So that's Canis Major, the big dog. Orion also has a second hunting dog, Canis Minor. And to find it, we want to jump from this bright star Sirius up to the next bright star right here, which is the star Procyon. And Procyon is the brightest star in Canis Minor. And just wait for this constellation, guys. Let me tell you. All right, you ready? It's these two stars. Yep. I don't know why Orion has a wiener dog as a hunting dog, but there you go. There's Canis Minor, our little dog. So Orion and his two faithful pooches are on the hunt for our next constellation. So we're going to take Orion's belt again, but this time instead of going down to Sirius, we're going to go up until we get to this kind of bright V in the sky. This really bright red star here is Aldebaran. And this V is the face of Taurus the bull. And so Aldebaran is one of the kind of red eyes of the bull. So this is the face with the nose here. His horns go up this way, and then his body stretches out over here. And then right in his body sits this little cluster of stars that kind of looks like a mini dipper. Now that little grouping of stars, I'm going to zoom in on it because we can do that with this program, is actually a star cluster known as the Pleiades, or the Seven Sisters. Called so because to your naked eye you can see 6 or 7 really bright stars, even though this cluster actually has, I believe, a few hundred stars in it. But you have 6 to 7 that are very bright that you can see without a telescope. And this is a very prominent grouping of stars in a lot of different cultural stories because it is a very bright, obvious grouping. You can see it even with a decent amount of light pollution. And most of the stories do revolve around the number 7 because of the number of stars that you can see. Now, I'm going to hand it over to Lindsay because she's got a couple of, or I don't know how many you want to tell. But she's got some really great stories from other cultures than the Greeks that involve our grouping of Pleiades here.
Yeah, the Pleiades is one of my favorite little groupings of stars because I think it was so kind of obvious to the naked eye. Cultures all around the world had stories about it, and I love learning about all the different ones. Even here in North America, every Native American tribe pretty much had their own story about the Pleiades. So one of those stories comes from the Inuit Native American tribe. And so this is about Nanook the polar bear. And there were some wolves that were chasing him. And he was trying to outrun them. And he was running and running and running, but they were keeping up with him. And so he was trying to figure out how he could get them to stop chasing him. And so he decided that to get them to stop chasing him, he would run off the edge of the earth. And so he did, and then they followed him. right off the edge of the earth with him, and he fell right into the sky. And they fell into the sky right behind him. So now that they're all stuck in the sky, they won't be able to catch him. But yeah, they are all there nonetheless. Um, so Nanook is one of the one of the stars of the Pleiades, and then the wolves are the other stars. And then another story comes from the Paiutes and the Sierra. Um, so we have the Grizzly sisters and the Deer sisters, and they were best friends and they played together every day. And then one day, Grizzly Mother ate Deer Mother, and so all of Deer sisters were really upset, and they captured all of the Grizzly sisters in a cave and trapped them there. And so all of the stars that are close together there in the Pleiades, those are all of the Grizzly sisters trapped in the cave. And then some of the nearby stars are the Deer sisters. And then probably my favorite, I think also Jessica's favorite, comes from the Western Mono Native American tribe. And so
Yes, I love this story.
wives, they were out, walking around, having a nice walk, hike through the woods, and they came across some wild onions and they just had to eat them. And so they ate them. And when they all went back home to their husbands, they had stinky onion breath, and their husbands kicked them out of the house for having stinky onion breath. And they did not want to have to be worried about getting kicked out of the house for having stinky onion breath anymore. And so they all went up into the sky to become stars. And of course, their husbands eventually, noticed that they couldn't find them, and they were trying to figure out what had happened to them. And eventually, they found out that their wives all went up to become stars. And so the husbands became stars also, and they are the kind of the part of the nose of Taurus up in the sky.
Yay, I love that one. All right. Well, thank you, Lindsay. Um, I guess what was I'm trying to remember the star that was the guy. Okay, anyway, sorry. Lindsay knows what I'm talking about. None of you guys know. I have another story about the group of stars that is Orion and the group of stars that make up the face of Taurus the Bull. This one comes from, I believe, Kenya. And so the idea is there is a man who's trying to hunt these zebra, which are represented by the belt stars. But surrounding the zebra are four lions that are also hunting them. Well, the poor man is kind of stuck in a difficult place because back here are his seven wives, or his many wives that are very, very hungry and waiting for him to come home with food. And so he is stuck trying to decide which is going to be worse, going back to his wives empty handed or fighting all of these lions for the zebra. And I just think it's a really funny story. All right. So let's move on to the last two of our winter hexagon. So, as a quick recap, we've done, of course, Orion, his big hunting dog, his little wiener hunting dog, and then Taurus the bull over here. So if we follow the horns of Taurus the bull, they point to these two stars here, which are a part of this kind of squished pentagon. This squished pentagon is Auriga the charioteer, and this very bright star in Auriga is named Capella. Oops. So Auriga doesn't appear to be the best charioteer because he's kind of upside down. So here's one wheel of the chariot. Here is the other wheel, the kind of basket of the chariot, and then there's his head sticking out over the top. And he appears to be in the midst of flipping upside down there. All right, the last of our winter hexagon constellations. It sits in between Auriga and Canis Minor, our little dog. And it's this cluster of stars here, with the two bright stars being Castor and Pollux. Castor and Pollux are known as the twin stars because they make up the two bright stars in Gemini, the twins. So Castor here has a long body and short little legs. Pollux has a short body and long legs. And they're kind of arm in arm walking along the Milky Way here. Now, there are a lot of great stories about the twins. I think one of our personal favorites, because these stories with Castor and Pollux always involve them getting into some sort of trouble. They're very mischievous twins. And so one of our favorites goes that Castor and Pollux actually crashed a wedding and decided to kidnap and run off with the bride. And so instead of being arm in arm here, they're actually carrying the bride as they run away. But what I have decided has happened, because, we are free to make up our own stories out of the stars in the sky. Since they are very mischievous twins, and Auriga here appears to be in a bit of trouble, what I think happened is the twins tipped over Auriga's chariot as a prank and are now running away before he can catch them. So yeah, that is the stars in our winter hexagon. We have Orion, Taurus, Auriga, Gemini, Canis Minor, Canis Minor, and Canis Major. All of our bright winter constellations. And some of my favorite constellations in the sky. That's why I definitely like observing in the winter. All right. Well, that about does it for what we have to show you tonight. Is there any last things, Lindsay, that you'd like to add?
Just some of our exciting events that we have.
Absolutely. I will say, in between the two dogs, this Monoceros that's supposed to be a unicorn.
Oh, yeah.
This is one that Lindsay and I have been trying to be able to identify ourselves in the sky, and it's difficult because it's some very, very dim stars. But the reason we want to is because of the way this is situated. It kind of looks like the little dog is riding on the unicorn. And I just love that mental image. And so, yeah, now you can have that as well. Our little wiener dog is riding on a unicorn. All right. So let me switch back over to Zoom here. So yeah, that is our December constellation show. A lot of good things to see up in the sky, a lot of stories from all over the world, because as I've said, the Greeks were not the only ones to make up stories. And as I've also shown you, you can make your own stories up too. It's
really funny ones from people coming to the planetarium about what they see up in the night sky.
Absolutely.
One of our favorite ones is a guy doing squats.
Yes. And if you've saw any of our summer constellation shows, you'll know what we're talking about. And if not, you can go back and watch those. Actually, we have them all posted. So yeah, there's a lot of great things, and we love hearing what you see. So if you come up with any cool new constellations, let us know. We'd love to hear them. We might even add them into our constellation shows, like we did for the man doing squats. It's one of our favorites to talk about now. All right, did we have any questions or anything come through? It's not looking. No? All right. Well, if you do have any questions for us, now is a great time to leave them down in the comments. And while I give that a minute, let me tell you about what's coming up over this month. So starting next week on Wednesday, we are going to have a show all about telescopes. So we're going to tell you kind of what you need to know to get started and give you our recommendations for good beginners telescopes, because we know that there are probably some loved ones out there who might be interested, and Christmas or the holidays could be a good, it might be something that you're thinking about doing for the holidays. So we want to point you on the right track.
Getting started with a telescope can be a lot cheaper than you think it's going to be.
Absolutely. But it's also important to not completely go the cheap route, because that could actually deter any future interest. And so we'll tell you everything that you need to know and also answer your questions. And then Saturday, we are going to do a show all about the Northern Lights, the Aurora Borealis, since the sun is starting to be a little bit more active. And if you don't know how the sun is involved, well, then definitely come hang out with us next Saturday and we'll tell you all about it.
Also, FYI, this picture behind me, this is a picture I took of the aurora from Duluth, from Brighton Beach.
Yeah.
So you can get pretty good aurora here in Duluth, even with some of the light pollution.
Absolutely. Which I'm excited.
The lift bridge is over here.
I'm very excited to finally see the aurora, because we haven't had any really good ones since I moved here. Which is to be expected because the sun's been quiet, but I don't want to give too much away about the show. So come hang out with us next weekend and you'll understand what we're talking about. And then we have a couple of special things also coming up this month. So December 21st is going to be a pretty major astronomical day. It is both the winter solstice and it's also the day of the Great Conjunction. And so we're going to be doing a telescope stream starting at 5:30, or maybe a little earlier if it gets dark enough. But we're going to do a telescope stream of the conjunction, and then afterwards we're going to do a special live stream event for the conjunction and the winter solstice. And we'll be joined by Bob King, aka Astro Bob, and Jim Rock is also going to join us and give us his indigenous perspective on everything, and also share some of his constellation stories with us. So yeah, a lot of fun stuff coming up this month, leading up to our winter solstice stream before we take a break for the holidays. The other thing I wanted to bring up is we are still selling our Stellar Distancing t-shirts to help raise money for the planetarium, since we have been closed since March. And so we haven't had ticket sales or event sales or anything like that. So if you enjoy what we're doing and you want to support us, we have these really cool t-shirts that we're selling. And a little bit of a teaser is we'll be coming out with some new stuff soon. Maybe shouldn't have said that out yet because details aren't finalized, but I'm gonna spoil it. We've got some new stuff coming out soon. There's something else I wanted to mention. Oh, we're also going to start doing private shows. So if you want to have a private show for your family or your class, you can book us for that. Details about that are going to go out on Monday. So yeah, I think that's all the announcements I have to talk about. So I'm not seeing anything coming through. So thank you everyone so much for joining us. We hope you enjoyed our constellation story time tonight. Have a wonderful rest of your weekend, and we will hopefully see you next time. Bye everyone.